For almost every champion of chaos, the end goal is the same: elevation to demonhood in the form of a demon prince. This near immortal reward grants great power to the blessed champion, but it is no easy thing to attain. Though demon princes far predate the days of the Imperium of Man, many of the more infamous ones are drawn from the Imperium's greatest breeds of warriors. Today, we look at one of perhaps the first demon princes to hail from the ranks of the Adeptus Astartes, a member of the original traitor legion who merged with a demonic entity seemingly assigned to him. However, this is also one of the few demon princes that we know about to have actually been killed, not banished, but granted a true and final death that permanently ended his existence. Formerly known as Maloq Kartho, Dark Apostle within the Word-Bearers Legion, he was known as the Reborn. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. Maloq Kartho was a member of the 17th Legion, the Word-Bearers, under the command of Primarch Lorgar Aurelian. His origins are sadly unknown. We do not know when he joined the Legion, from what world he was recruited, nothing of the sort. I do not believe he was Terran, as most all of that contingent were killed on campaign or internally following Lorgar's discovery and movement of the Legion to Colchis. The best bet is that he was from that now destroyed world due to his station within the Legion. Kartho was, by the time of the Horus Heresy anyway, a Dark Apostle, the corrupted equivalent to the chaplains that had been drastically changed by Lorgar from when the 17th were known as the Imperial Heralds before he was found. They became propagators of the belief that the Emperor was a god, and after the censure at Monarchia by said Emperor enforcing the opposite, they would go on to presumably spread the creed of the ruinous powers through the 17th. Certainly Kartho was doing this, and was presumably pretty respected even if he wasn't exactly on the level of individuals such as the High Chaplain, Erebus. He was the apostle beneath a very senior captain known as Hol Beloth, someone whose ambition Kartho had encouraged. Beloth and Kartho's combat record is unknown until the Horus Heresy, in particular the Battle of Calth that first dragged the Ultramarines into the Great Betrayal. Given that they had been nominated for this mission, it is presumed that these individuals hated the Ultramarines and were perhaps clouded by that hatred, since Argeltal and Lorgar sent just those individuals into the fray as a way of purging supposed incompetence from the Word-Bearers. Their forces were tasked with securing a location called Landshire on Calth's surface. The location contained a data engine that seemed to be part of the Word-Bearers' attempts to control Calth's orbital weapons grid. This made it a high priority target for the Ultramarines once they worked out what was going on and just how it was being done. The 4th Company of the 13th Legion under Captain Remus Ventanus travelled to Landshire in an attempt to take the engine back, but despite reinforcement from Titans and other companies, they could not quite break the demonic Galvor back and the rest of Belos' forces. However, a simultaneous battle was taking place aboard the orbital platforms themselves, won by Primarch Robert Gilliman and Captain Aenid Thiel, that broke the hold over the defences. With this new advantage, the Magos accompanying Ventanus was able to seize the grid after accessing the data engine, and this proved decisive as almost all of Belos' forces were annihilated in the following orbital bombardments. The Word-Bearers, Kartho included, retreated underground, which proved to be the safest manoeuvre after the actions of Erebus and Corferon caused the planet's star to emit radiation that was lethal to humanity via a dark ritual. Though the Battle of Calth by most records ended soon after, though Gilliman will not stop the mark of Calth until every Word-Bearer lies dead, there was another phase that followed the retreat of the 17th Legion's fleets and commanders, the Underworld or Underground War, depending on who you ask. This was pretty much what you'd expect from the name: subterranean warfare that perhaps only occasionally reached the surface of Calth. Kartho, of course, took part in this, though he did need to goad his commander back into the fighting after his failure on the surface. At this point, I suspect that the Dark Apostle was working for his own advancement in the eyes of the Chaos Gods as much as to slay the Ultramarines. It is unknown when exactly his focus had shifted, but by now he had one goal in mind: demonhood. To do this, the Apostle led his captain back to the surface with the goal of recovering one of the most lethal weapons in the Imperial arsenal, a virus bomb that was capable of wiping out the survivors of Calth. The plan was to detonate this bomb after luring out that pesky Captain Ventanus, whose forces had also managed to retreat underground. But to get him in play, Kartho had an equally spectacular plan in mind: atomic warfare. Kartho detonated an atomic bomb of some kind, where he got it I don't know, sacrificing the entire Wordbearer's force with him, as well as the defenders of a substantial stronghold of the Legion that had somehow survived the hell of the surface. In total, the atomic blast killed millions, and Kartho had seemingly already done enough with this mass sacrifice to begin his transformation. The powers of the warp came to him as he gained the ability to open rifts, but his other plan had also succeeded and Ventanus' forces were en route. The defenders of the fortress somehow rose again to fight the Ultramarines, seemingly transformed into possessed Astartes that pushed the Ultramarines to their limit. But Ventanus was still able to bring his troops to bear on the transforming Kartho and the demon-transformed Beloth who had survived the nuke. Beloth was slain thanks to an Athame dagger, but Kartho would not meet his fate there, as his own warp rift proved his downfall. A land speeder knocked him through the rift, and the virus bomb went broadly the same way, saving the rest of Calth from annihilation. That said, he had still done enough to prove his worth, and he received his ascension. Well, sort of. Rather than being infused with warp energy and made into a demon prince as is as near as possible to standard fare as it gets, Maloq Kartho instead fused with a demonic entity known as Kar to become the being that would cause so much harm over the following millennia. This Kar had seemingly been loosely assigned to Kartho even before the ascension, as it was called away from hunting down the perpetual old person, better known as Alanius Pius, after the human and his group had fled from Calth. Whether Kartho was simply infused with Kar's power, or it was more of a non-hostile takeover, or a more hostile takeover, is unclear. But either way, the Demon Prince Kar the Reborn was created from the combination of the two. After the fusion of Maloq Kartho and Kar into the Demon Prince named after the latter, I am sad to report that details become very sparse concerning its whereabouts in the following millennia. In fact, like many things we cover in these logs, things go quiet until M41 for Kar the Reborn, but from what we know of him, he was very busy in that time frame following the first known appearance. The first was in 799M41, taking place on the world of Acrolem in the Vidar sector of Ultima Segmentum. Kar's goal here was simply conquest and destruction, turning Acrolem into his throne world for a new empire or a basis from which to destroy more. However, his plan was somewhat foreseen as the Grey Knight's Third Brotherhood, accompanied by a wider Imperial coalition, assembled to defeat him. They didn't arrive immediately, as Kar had seemingly managed to establish a form of warp fortress on the planet, but even then the Demon Prince would be undone. The reason? Acrolem marked somewhat the coming of age for one of the great heroes of the Grey Knights today. Their current chapter master, though only a battle brother at the time, Kaldor Drago. Drago was the one to finally strike down and banish Kar during his assault on Acrolem, but this would not be the last time the two met. For now, the Demon Prince was able to somehow curse the Grey Knight before he was forced from the Materium. However, he wasn't banished for all that long, less than a century in fact, and in 878M41 he was back in a place I bet was somewhat familiar, Ultramar, specifically its border region known as the Hellamar Rift. Kar was leading a fleet of piratical chaos forces on this occasion, but with the goal seemingly still being one of conquest as opposed to raiding or looting. Several worlds were taken before a response could be mustered and led by the Ultramarines under Cato Sicarius, but the Demon Prince was able to escape as his fleet was taken out. This time his absence from the Materium was even shorter than the last, and in 935M41 he was back in Ultramar. His forces, this time more demonic than before, captured a star fort known as the Indomitable, a weapons platform said to rival the black stone fortresses that was orbiting the world of Umkar's creation, Kalth. I've heard tell that the Demon Prince couldn't set foot on the planet itself, but with a weapon like the Indomitable, I doubt that was much of an issue. This time, the Ultramarines' response came in the form of their chapter master Marneus Calgar and their first company, accompanied by the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus, who boarded the Star Fort and together defeated Umkar once again. According to the chapter records at the time, Calgar was able to kill Umkar, supposedly tearing him limb from limb. But this proved to be false. Calgar lied, though no one knew for decades. Long story short, Umkar didn't die. He was a demon, and you need a true name to actually kill them off, and seemingly the Malleus forces present were not exactly up to banishing him. As a result, the group was somehow able to seal Umkar away, trapping his essence within the warp core of the Indomitable before setting the fort on a supposedly untraceable random path through the Immaterium. Unfortunately, this path wasn't as good as Calgar and co expected, and even though it would be a while until the lies were exposed, Umkar was still able to wreak his fair share of havoc despite being somewhat imprisoned. No, I don't know how he did it, but it is an impressive feat regardless. The next time we saw him pop up is an incident we mentioned in our Champions of Humanity logs, taking place at a place called Solon 5 in 965 M41. The Demon Prince trapped the Blood Angel's chief librarian Mephiston within the planet's crystalline caverns in an attempt to tempt the reborn Calistarius to the side of chaos. Though Umkar claimed that Mephiston was already on the road to demonhood, and not just the first step on said road, he made no progress. Mephiston was having none of it, and whatever presence Umkar had on Solon 5 was ripped apart. He then went quiet for a while, seemingly plotting something grander, and this came to fruition in 997 M41 on the former agri-world of Sondheim 5 in Segmentum Tempestus. Umkar and his forces, drawn from the demonic armies of several Chaos gods, invaded and transformed the planet into a demon world, but this paradise and playground would not be solely inhabited by warp denizens for long. Very soon after, Sondheim 5 was invaded by a Tyranid hive fleet. Most sources believe this was part of Hive Fleet Leviathan, though some claim it was Kraken, which is also plausible if any splinters happen to survive. The initial Imperial response to this, assumedly Umkar's invasion rather than the Tyranids, it all happened rather fast, was the Sky Sentinel Space Marine chapter. But their response was that the planet was beyond saving. An exterminatus was ordered, but then overruled by the arrival of a Grey Knights task force. Umkar had taken over using the power of a tome known as the Book of Pandagaras, and the Grey Knights bade the Sky Sentinels withhold their exterminatus until the forces of Titan could recover the book. Interestingly, it does not seem as though Umkar engaged with the Grey Knights in any way during the battle, or at least if he did, it wasn't anything major, or we just don't know. The Grey Knights fought their way through both the demons and Tyranids to reach the Book of Pandagaras, with the Sky Sentinels providing support in the form of orbital bombardments. And though the world was still ultimately cleansed by exterminators, it was considered by the Imperium as a job well done. Assumedly, Umkar or whatever part of him was on Sondheim made a clean escape, but his main form was still trapped in the warp core of the Indomitable. At least until someone picked up the trail and hunted him down. Sometime in 999 M41, Umkar actually had one more engagement, I believe before whoever was hunting him got him. That took place again on Acrolem, which you may remember was where he fought with Kaldor Drago. Drago was now Supreme Grand Master and had decided to go and hunt Umkar alone after 200 years when another distress signal of demons came from the planet. And you know what? He actually pulled it off. I'm not quite sure how, I'm assuming Grey Knight nonsense, but he was able to defeat Umkar again. But Umkar would have, you might say, the last laugh. As he was dragged back to the warp, presumably banished by Drago, he either invoked or otherwise improved upon the curse that he'd laid on Drago 200 years prior, dragging the Supreme Grandmaster into the warp, where he's pretty much remained for the rest of time, aside from occasionally popping out and maybe getting a little bit more airtime now that the Cicatrix Maledictum is here. Following that, in the years leading up to 854999 M41, yes, lots of numbers go with it, the warsmith Honshu of the Iron Warriors was a very busy individual indeed. Perhaps I'll get his own log in future now that I think about it. In any event, his tale intertwines with Umkar's after Honshu had triumphed in the Skull Harvest, a grand tournament held on the Red Corsair homeworld of New Badab within the Maelstrom that gave the warsmith a massive pile of troops thanks to the generosity of Huron Blackheart. Honshu sought to use the power of Moriana, a seer who had supposedly been a handmaiden to the Emperor himself but had become hateful of the Imperium. That's not to say she served chaos, in fact she seemed to be at best indifferent toward it, but she had worked alongside Abaddon several times. The warsmith hunted down Moriana's lair on some unknown world somewhere, and he had a specific goal in mind: finding Umkar. Quite how Honshu had heard of Umkar is unknown. He was on the younger end of the Iron Warriors, but he'd still somehow gotten word of the Demon Prince that had such an undying burning hatred for the Ultramarines. Moriana's abilities allowed Honshu to find and storm the location of the Indomitable, thus freeing Umkar from its warp core and completing the 1,000-strong army granted by Huron and known by the somewhat usurping Demon Prince as the Bloodborne. This army was gathered for one particular goal, something that would sate the vengeance of both Umkar and of Honshu: the destruction of Ultramar and presumably the Ultramarines along with it. The Indomitable became one of the flagships of the Bloodborne fleets, and the invasion of Ultramar began on the agri-world of Torrentus to the west of Macragge. Umkar summoned a huge army of demons to act as the invasion force as opposed to spending the mortal numbers of the Bloodborne, sending a powerful message to the Ultramarines and presumably embarrassing Manius Calgar a lot as he was forced to admit he hadn't actually killed Umkar. A response force led by Captain Uriel Ventress, himself the main target of Honshu's hatred, was lucky to escape after trying to aid Torrentus, and the Bloodborne then took the ocean world of Talassar. At this point, the armies of Chaos split into several smaller forces as opposed to being predictable and staying as one big rolling death block. Umkar himself actually stayed with the Indomitable over Talassar, deciding that he would let Manius Calgar come to him, whilst Honshu took his contingent to destroy the tomb of Umkar's original old foe, Remus Ventanus, upon Calth. The power of Chief Librarian Tigurius allowed the Ultramarines to respond. Ventress went to Calth, Garter Sicarius is believed to have travelled to Espandor, and Calgar travelled to Talassar with Tigurius and the First Company, though some say it was Sicarius and the Second. The Ultramarines were forced to make planetfall after their battle barges were shot down, and much of the fighting did not involve Umkar personally on Talassar for the next month. It seems as though Tigurius' power was keeping him from manifesting on the planet's surface, whilst also defeating his demonic forces for a bit. Unfortunately for the Ultramarines, Tigurius couldn't hold forever, and so Umkar eventually made his way down to Talassar to finish what he'd started 10,000 years ago. His demonic armies inflicted heavy damage on the warriors under Calgar, but elsewhere in the campaign, the Bloodborne had fared poorly. Quintan and Espandor of Ultramar both held, and Ventress was able to drive off, though not slay Honshu on Calth, thanks to the Legion of the Damned's timely intervention, along with, if you can believe it, the Ghost of Ventanus, so I hear. This victory for Ventress proved also to be the tipping point of the battle for Talassar, as his time in the Tomb of Ventanus brought not only the knowledge of how to defeat Umkar, but also the means by which it could be accomplished. The Fourth Company captain, once he arrived, spoke the true mortal name of Umkar, Maloq Kartho, aloud. This in turn weakened and disoriented the Demon Prince, and the tactic of using true names in this manner to weaken or even bind demons is a common Grey Knight trick, though it doesn't seem to work for every Demon Prince since many keep their old names and get on just fine. It seems as though mortal names can be, but are not necessarily true names. It's a bit of a weird one. Either way, Umkar was weak, and this allowed Ventress to provide Calgar with the weapon known as the Shard of Erebus, an Athame dagger found within Ventanus' tomb that was either taken from Holbeloth by Ventanus, or was perhaps the one he used to banish the demon Samus in the Battle of Calth. Its origins, however, are kind of no import here. What mattered was the devastating effect. Umkar was stabbed by Calgar with the Athame, and unlike the last time the two squared off, he died. Because of the use of the true name and or the Athame, this was no standard demonic, oh you've managed to banish my physical form but I'll be back eventually sort of death. Oh no, this was one of only a handful of known true deaths to be inflicted on a demon. Umkar's essence was actually destroyed as opposed to returning to the warp like it usually would. The Indomitable was destroyed not long after, and though almost 40% of the chapter's numbers had been lost in the effort, the Ultramarines had saved their home and destroyed one of their longest running, perhaps even most hated enemies. And no, Umkar's curse on Drago still held. Sorry, Drago. So ended the tale of Umkar the Reborn. Though many Demon Princes have had more success in their campaigns against the enemies of Chaos, Umkar has wreaked a lot of havoc and destruction across the Imperium, despite often losing in the end from the modern records we have. His vengeance on the Ultramarines may not have been fully realised and ultimately cost him his own life, but Umkar, or Maloq Kartho, has been one of the greater challenges for the Sons of Guilliman in his own unique way. Plus, he gets to belong to a very select club of truly dead demons, and whilst I don't think that's a good club to be in, it's still notable. Now, with that tale told and a note penciled into the margin to look at Honshu one day, we must move on. And I think I know just the place I want to go. We're still learning bits about what goes on with this world, but it has a reputation beyond peer for the viciousness of the warfare that takes place within its hives and society. For now though, thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.